The climate crisis grows worse and worse every day, and many organizers are fighting back against it. We have one of those organizers with us today who is involved in a protest in the halls of Congress. This is Kaitlin Sopoci-Belknap, the National Director of Move to Amend. Kaitlin, welcome to the show.
Hi, Brett. Thanks for having me on.
It's great to have you here. Now, before we get to video of this protest in Congress, which is just fascinating and traumatic, but also powerful at the same time. Tell us a little bit about your organization and what you're fighting for.
Well, so just to be clear, the protest was organized by Extinction Rebellion, and I actually just stepped in. They were short one person. I've been in DC because I work for Move to Amend, which is a national campaign to amend the US Constitution to end corporate personhood and get money out of politics. But obviously there's very connected to climate change, because the reason why our elected officials haven't done anything about climate change is that they're in the pocket of multinational corporations, in particular fossil fuel companies. And so I'm just really worried about what the future holds. And when the folks at Extinction Rebellion wanted to organize a brand new way to get Congress's attention, I was happy to step up last week.
Right, so you were there, you saw it all happen. We have video of it, but just tell us a little bit about it. People superglued themselves to the doors of Congress. What was going on?
Right. So there are 3 different buildings that all of the House members use for their offices, and then there are tunnels that connect those buildings underground to the Capitol where they go to vote. And so what we did last Tuesday is superglued our hands, one hand to the glass door on one side, and then on the other side, most of us were holding another person's hand that was also super glued to each other to block Congress from going to just a regular vote. Because a couple weeks ago, Bernie Sanders in the Senate and then AOC and Earl Blumenauer introduced an emergency resolution similar to the ones that have been passed in the UK and Canada, trying to declare that the climate situation is an emergency, a declaration of a climate emergency, and it hasn't moved anywhere. And so the folks at Extinction Rebellion were trying to draw attention to this. So it gave us an opportunity to pretty much see almost every single member of Congress face to face as they tried to pass by us to go and do their regular vote.
Hi, Kaitlin, Brooke here. Now, something happened during this protest, and we have video of it. I want to show it, and then I want you to walk me through what happened.
Until we get a climate emergency to protect the lives of future generations, including our own and Generation Z.
This entranceway is closed. Our politicians have chosen inaction. The latest line says that.
Wow, Kaitlin, what was going on there?
Yeah, so I was the woman who was in that video, and like I said, we were super glued on one hand to the glass doors and then each other, and that was Congressman Bob Gibbs, who's from Ohio. He incidentally takes a tremendous amount of money from fossil fuel corporations, $183,000 in his career to date, and when he tried to push through us, we were at that point letting people through because we determined it would be safer, and so people were passing underneath us, and we were talking to them about why we need the emergency declaration, and he didn't want to pass underneath us. Obviously, he saw that that was a way to get through, but he wanted to break through us. So he first tried on one hand where we were together, and then he just went straight for my arm, and yeah, he ripped my hand off of the glass. It didn't end up breaking the skin, but it really, really, really hurt.
Oh, wow.
He certainly intended to cause me harm. I was telling him I'm glued to this door, and he said, I don't care, and ripped my hand off the glass.
So he did not have a policy discussion with you at that moment, though I did do some research into previous statements he's made about climate change. He said in the past, I just don't buy into it. I think the whole thing is up in the air. I remember back in the 70s, they were talking about global cooling. They're thinking global warming now. I think the sun has more to do with it than anything. What is your response to this well-informed scientific position of Bob Gibbs?
Well, I mean, obviously he doesn't know what he's talking about, and right now the Arctic has fires, which is something that is incredibly rare. We have seen, crazy weather all over the country, all over the world. And there's, at this point, no question whether climate collapse is currently happening, is the result of fossil fuel and carbon emissions caused by human beings. And we absolutely need to act. I mean, we needed to have acted for the last 30 years. And that's part of why we need to protest Congress, because many of those folks have been in there that long and have certainly known about this, and they have not done anything about it. And so, I was there. I have a 7-year-old nephew and a 3-year-old nephew, and I'm very worried about their future. I'm very worried about all the animals that are going extinct, and the millions of people who are going to be displaced and ultimately, die because of something that was honestly entirely preventable if we had changed the course of things when scientists first started warning us about it. And so congressmen like Bob Gibbs, they're not representing their constituents right now. They're representing giant multinational corporations. He's a member of ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, which basically writes legislation on behalf of corporations and hands them to our elected officials. And that's why there's a real connection with Move to Amend, because corporations are ruling us. They are basically making the fundamental public policy decisions for our country, and that's what's put us in this horrible situation when it comes to climate collapse.
So I just have a quick question, because I think a lot of people, as you mentioned, are worried about the future. And so for fellow progressives and activists, allies, besides calling our representatives, what do you think people should be doing?
Well, Move to Amend has been passing ballot initiatives all over the country. So that's going directly to voters and then calling on Congress to pass our amendment. In terms of climate change, I think at this point, we need to be doing civil disobedience. And that was why I was happy to join the folks from Extinction Rebellion. And that organization, their number one priority is to tell the truth on climate change and then to do whatever's necessary nonviolently to get our elected leaders to act. And at this point, we have gone through the process of doing the petitioning and the calling, and around climate change, it hasn't made any difference. And many of the presidential candidates, what the ideas that they're putting forward, the proposals, won't get it done. So it's time for us to escalate. So next month, when the climate strikes are happening all over the world, called by literally children who are asking us to step up and defend their future, I hope all of your listeners will consider how far you're willing to go in terms of standing up for something that could not be more important.
And I hope all our viewers do as well. Kaitlin Sopoci-Belknap of the Move to Amend. I'm sorry you had to go through all that, but I'm very grateful for your activism. Thank you for joining us on The Damage Report.
Thank you so much for having me.
Here on The Damage Report, we talk a lot about the big banks and their ways of getting rich off the poor. They saturate the market, but there are other options. And I've got info on a socially and environmentally responsible financial institution that has no ATM fees, gives you cash back on every purchase. They even commit 10% of their earnings to charity. It's called Aspiration, and if you go to aspiration.com/TYT to sign up, you'll get these perks, and that's more money to spend or to save or to spend. Just treat yourself.